All right, listeners. Well, I have a special treat for you this afternoon, or whenever you're listening to it. It's actually Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon for Charles, probably. There's a 3-hour time difference. I have Charles Buell out of the Seattle, Washington area. How you doing this afternoon, Charles?
Great, great.
I've actually wanted to have Charles on for a long time. One of the most knowledgeable guys I'm familiar with. I've read, he's a really, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but really big into blogs and writing. Very good writer, very prolific, and you can educate yourself just by following Charles and reading some of his stuff. So Charles, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Tell us a little bit about your background and, how did you get to be a home inspector and all that good stuff?
Well, I probably got here a lot of the same way lots of guys. I was a design build general contractor for 33 years. I grew up in a family where my dad was a carpenter and all around handyman. I used to say he forgotten more than I ever knew, but I think by now that's probably shifted a bit. I hope, but I'm always learning, always wanting to learn, always demanding to learn. Really, I think as a home inspector, it's crucial that you have that, be willing to always learn something new. So as a builder for years and years, and then I hurt stuff, we beat
Right.
myself up pretty bad, pounding nails, and on top of that, I was a sport climber. So physically, I just couldn't do it anymore. So
Right.
I had a brother-in-law that was on the Housemaster franchise, and he said, "Hey, you ought to become a home inspector." So that started the wheels going, and I took the training. I went to a local community college, taught a home inspection training course, and I took that, and the rest is 15 years later now.
Right. So you became a home inspector. I think I was reading a little bit in your bio there on your website. 2004, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's about when you were right around that time too, I think, weren't you?
Yeah, 99. When I did pest control, kind of rolled into it. But I do have a question for you. I read somewhere. Do you have an art degree? Because I'm into art.
Yeah, well, that's what I went to college for. When I got out of college, I had to learn how to do something to survive. So
Same. I'm actually in my studio. I don't know if you can. Let me see if I can hold this up.
Yeah. I see some paintings in the background.
Yeah. There's some of my paintings. I just do it for a hobby. I'm really good at things that don't make money.
Yeah, well, that's lots of times I felt like I had the two worst careers: an artist and a builder.
Yeah. Well, in a home inspector, you had the third one too. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that one I've made more money at than either of the other two. But
Charles, I actually started out as an art major. It's a long story, and I want this interview to be about you, not me. I was a finalist for a art scholarship at Pratt. It's a long story, but I didn't get it. I got really close. And I was going to major in art in college, and I did. I started out, but that idea of being a starving artist, and it just didn't appeal. So I switched over to business.
Yeah, but I was in the 60s and early 70s, so I was willing to starve.
Yeah. It was more in style then, I think.
It definitely was. Definitely.
So tell us a little bit now. Before you became a home inspector, you were a builder, and I saw you did. Did you do like kitchen design or something too, or something like that?
I was designing and building whole houses, mostly passive solar, super insulated houses. That's back before it was popular, really. Back in the first energy crisis, back when it was all about global cooling instead of global warming.
In the 80s, I think, right?
Didn't really understand what was going on at that time, but so I won an award for a passive solar house that I built, and done a lot of consulting related to that. And so it's been kind of real love for me is working on houses and designing and building houses that were actually not just more dinosaurs that you and I both look at every day.
Yeah.
So I've, it still really interests me. That's what I love to teach about in building science and whatnot. I think it's gotten to the point where home inspectors that don't have a good understanding of building science or really can't talk about houses.
Right. So yeah, I saw. So do you teach a building science or home inspection course? Is it Bellingham? Is that?
Yeah, at Bellingham Technical College. Yeah, I teach. I teach 3 sections. I teach electrical, plumbing, and building science. So those 3 are kind of my babies.
Right. Now, is this specifically for home inspectors or contractors as well? Or?
Just for home inspectors, yeah.
Okay. I saw you guys have a licensed state. Is it, and I think I read, I could be wrong, is it 160 hours? Is that what required? And you're on the board, I think, too, right?
That's right. Yeah. I actually have my last meeting coming up, 6 years on the board coming up next week. So I'll miss being on the board, but it's been interesting seeing the process of how government works and doesn't work.
Emphasis on the latter. No, I mean we're a licensed state too, and I'm glad we are. I mean, I know there's a big debate about that, but there's certain things I think are fantastic, and then some things they come up with are proposed. What's the reason?
Well, part of the problem is that our license laws are all built around compromise.
Right.
So there's going to be something that somebody doesn't like, and there's going to be something that everybody likes. That's the way the system works,
right.
Or doesn't work. You could argue, but I think it's important for it to be there. We need it there as a starting point. We're in our infancy as a profession, if you can even use that word most of the time, but I use it in parentheses because it's important to understand that we haven't arrived. This is a process of where I hope that someday we can actually be a real profession the way others are, like an engineer or an architect or a doctor or lawyer or whatever, somebody that actually has a fair amount of training and experience and whatnot in order to do this job. Because right now it's kind of all over the place, as you know.
It's kind of the Wild Wild West.
It really is. It really is. And there's so many vested interests in seeing that things stay the way they are in many cases, and resistant to change. And I think that's part of the core of why we're having this conversation today.
Right. Awesome. You're dead on. Well, Charles, that kind of leads us into our first question after the background stuff. So if somebody was coming to you today, and I know you get them all the time, I get them too. Hey, man, I want to be a home inspector. I'm interested in being a home inspector. And most of them, when I tell them what's required and I give them some things to check, I never hear from them again. But every once in a while, one will go through with what I tell them. So what's your advice if somebody, because you're well respected in the community, in the home inspection community, somebody wants to become a home inspector, what's your advice? What do you tell them?
Well, this is a really difficult question, because I think you have to get at where do you want to be with your life? What do you want to do for your clients? Do you want to be, because it's not hard to become a home inspector.
Right.
I mean, basically, some states you just say you're a home inspector and you're a home inspector. But in a licensed state, there are some rudimentary time you've got to spend, some money you got to spend to become a home inspector. It's not difficult to take a course, pass a national home inspector exam if that's the case, and legally that qualifies you. But does that make you a home inspector? I seriously doubt it. I teach my students that there's no way our 160-hour course will ever come close to preparing you to be a home inspector. Somehow you have to do the additional work. Now, part of the reason I wanted to have you move this question to this point of our conversation was because this is the core of it all.
Right.
If we can't come to some kind of consensus as a burgeoning profession as to where we want to go, what we want to be as an industry, if all we want to do is be part of a real estate transaction, and that's easy. That's a no-brainer. You can do that all day long and not really understand everything that might be actually more help to your client. Take, for example, I'm trying to think of a good example, but maybe I can't right now.
I'll try to help you if you can.
I'm just trying to. Most students come into class and they think that they don't. First of all, they don't want to be there. They already figured they know enough.
Right.
And communicate. Usually, by the end of the first day, they realize that, oh, maybe I don't. There's so much to know, as you know, and I don't think it's possible to communicate that in 120 hours. Most of the time, by the time they get to my three classes are the last three before we start to do field training, and they're pretty much brain dead by the time I get them. They've filled the cup up and it's running over on the floor everywhere. They just haven't got room for any more. Anything that's going in one ear, out the other. That is no way to train home inspectors.
Right.
To me, until we get this to the point where home inspectors are maybe a year or two of classroom type training, because what we're dealing with is how many students or how many people do you train that come into the field and they have no construction background at all?
I'd say it's probably about 50-50. Some of them.
Yeah. So, and of that 50-50, the ones that have some experience, they were maybe framers, they were maybe plumbers, they were maybe electricians. But,
right.
When this profession started, you had guys that actually knew how to do things. You actually knew how to fix things. You used to know how things work. And that's what today's people coming into this profession, they don't know how stuff works.
Right.
That website, how stuff works.
Right.
That's what we need to bring to this profession. People need to understand, if they understand how stuff works, they can add that to anything they're looking at in the field. They can understand plumbing, they can understand electrical, but we're coming into this profession basically with maybe very defined skills. If we're coming out of the trades, we may know plumbing really well.
Right.
All that does is show you how to cut the floor joists wrong, right? Or you come in
4-inch pipe right through the joist.
Yeah, or you come in as an electrician. Well, that means you learn how to drill through that.
Well, I came in on the termite side, so I was really strong on the wood destroying insects. But because I did that, I had awareness of a lot of other things because I was underneath houses all the time. But I always say that if you know, like if it's an electrician, he's going to be really strong there, but now he's going to have to learn plumbing and he's going to have to learn roofing.
Right. That's right. He's going to realize, he's going to learn about all those beams he never should have drilled through, all of this stuff, and to come into this profession with a higher level of that kind of background is crucial, I think, in order to interpret a house, to read a house, to understand a house, to know how the thing works, to see it as a living, breathing entity, as opposed to drywall here, paint, plumbing over here, and electrical over there. It's never. It's the sum of all those parts,
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me ask you this, Charles. None of us has this much power, but if you could, wake up tomorrow morning and say, Charles, we're going to put you in charge of what it takes to be a home inspector. What would that do? Are you thinking like a year degree or an associate degree where they go through all, different programs? And I'm not being, I think it's a good idea. I'm just asking, and it's going to evolve, I think. What would you think? And there's no perfect answer to this question. Yeah. But what, and like you said, we're in infancy. If you go back and look at Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, they became a lawyer. They were both lawyers with 2 degrees, 2 years of college at William and Mary, 2 years of college total. So obviously things have evolved with every profession. So
that's kind of an interesting dilemma because back then the world was much different in terms of how much information you had to know in order to survive. Now we need to know a lot more.
Right.
It's just, there's so much. But the interesting thing about that is it's easier. If we have an internet that's an amazing resource for all kinds of information, but we have no ability to filter it. We have no ability to know fact from fiction. So I tell students, I said, one of the most important things we can develop is what I call bulldar, where it's a kind of a radar where it's just not correct. That what you're looking at or what you're hearing it just doesn't smell right, taste right, feel right, whatever. And we don't teach in our schools, or we don't teach home inspectors how to develop that sense, and so you end up with not knowing who to ask, not knowing where to look, not knowing where to go. But I think the internet has transformed that to some extent. But we have to know what resources you're looking at and which ones to trust, which ones not to trust. We all know inspectors out there that you're not going to ask. If you got a question, you're not going to call XYZ. You might call somebody else that you has either through the school of hard knocks or whatever has gained a reputation that they either know what they're talking about or don't know what they're talking about. And unfortunately, it's not easy to sort out.
No, I'm with you. And in fact, maybe when I first started, I knew a lot about pest control and that sort of stuff. And I was probably like one of your students. And but over the years, I got beaten up on some stuff and had to pay for some stuff. And I've gotten a lot smarter, man.
Yeah, well, that's why I tell students. I said the most important ingredient to being a home inspector is being willing to be wrong.
Oh yeah, I'm willing to be wrong every day. I always tell my guys, I said, how they tenderize. This is always my quote. I said, how they tenderize meat, right? They beat it with a pointy hammer and they rub salt in it. And I said, that's pretty much how you become a seasoned home inspector.
Yeah. You got to get the salt in there, to pay your dues. But it'd be nice to have a higher level coming in. I think that's the big thing that I see as a problem for our industry is the consumer is footing the bill, in a sense, for our education.
Right.
We should not be educating ourselves at the expense of the consumer. I'd like to see us coming in out of the gate at a little bit higher level, or quite a bit higher level, frankly. And like, to answer your question, originally, I think a 2-year degree at a minimum, where you're taking an electrical 101, an HVAC 101, and a plumbing 101, and you're getting the basic stuff, because in many cases, we are all seeing stuff that licensed plumbers, licensed electricians are doing wrong all the time, and we, in a sense, have to know more than they do.
I agree. I'm with you. I probably wouldn't have agreed with you 15 years ago because I was that,
exactly.
But I've seen so much, and it's just, I mean, like when somebody comes to me and they want to be a home inspector, and the first thing they tell me is, I hear you can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to do this. I mean, your motivation or your reason for doing this is all wrong. I mean,
that's right.
I mean, if you're interested in the trades and your mind thinks about how things work, and you're investigative, and you like helping people, and you're willing to admit you're wrong and have a good attitude, then this profession might be for you. But if your motivation is, hey, I can make a lot of money in this,
unfortunately, I think that's a big percentage of home inspectors' motives for getting into it is money first, and for me, it's helping people first. I want a happy client. I want to take care of them as best I can, and in order to do that, you got to know a lot of crap.
Yeah, you got to know a lot of stuff.
Know a lot of stuff, and
to me, I mean, I've done pretty well. I mean, knock on wood, but that's not really, one of the biggest things I worked with Home Charlotte, and there's other programs out there, but this thing got people from public housing to home ownership. And these people had to take like classes because they'd never owned a home before, just changing filters and, just basic home maintenance stuff. And I got to teach some of that. And it was just so, and then we wound up doing inspections for these people, and they, buying their first house and owning their first, this is the American dream. And that to me is like the most awesome thing. I mean, obviously we do inspections for people who, it's their 10th house, but it's so exciting when it's their first house. And especially if it was a real climb or a real struggle to get that first house. And I just love being a part of that. And I don't want them to get stuck with unknown, unforeseen stuff on the back end when, it took every resource they had just to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and there's some people that should just remain the renters they are.
That is true. That is true. I tell some people, you can't call, you can't call the maintenance guy anymore. You can't. I don't know if you ever watched that show, One Day at a Time. You can't call Schneider. And I'm not Schneider. They call you 3 years later because the water heater. I'm like, wait a minute. It worked fine for 3 years.
Well, I love the young couple. They've been watching HGTV for too many years, and they want this old turn of the century, last century fixer, and
they're both accountants, or something.
Yeah, exactly. And one of my first questions to people like that is, are you up for a project?
Are you handy?
Are you up for a project, or are you handy? Or are one of you handy? Or both of you handy? And they, of course, the answer is always no. And then so they get the laundry list of what's going on with the house, and the next thing you know, they're of course bailing on the house, and the next thing they're looking at a brand new townhouse or something like that. And that's much more practical. And in some ways, that to me is a failure on the part of their agent. Their agent should have saved them the
On the
cost
front
of
end.
that first inspection on the front end.
Yeah.
So we're a profession that's sort of wrestling with the incompetence of another profession on many levels. And to me, the best agents are the ones that I've had agents that have had their clients put offers on 6 houses. I mean, why does that happen?
Oh.
Because the agent doesn't understand what the client needs or wants. Why are they showing them all those houses? I mean, maybe 1 or 2, but 6? I mean, come on. That's
somebody's not. You're not listening to their on the front end, or
and I guess you can have somebody that's unreasonable. Like that, there's always unreasonableness in the world, but. As a general rule, I think that agents, good agents really understand that about a client, and they don't show them that many houses. But I've heard of agents that, I've been working with them for 2 years. I've looked at 50, 60 houses. Somebody needs to get up.
Right. Well, that kind of leads me to another question, Charles. Just like we kind of discussed, there's good home inspectors and others. There's good real estate agents and others. Now, I know at this point in your career, your life, you've probably built up, because you have a really good reputation, you write, that kind of business comes to you, because of your reputation. But going back to that question, a new person starting out, let's say they do all the things that you say, and they do a lot of training, basically learn about HVAC, they do all the stuff. How would you recommend them going about getting business? Because if they don't know anybody and they don't have a reputation yet, but they have done the homework,
Yeah. Well, one idea I have is that here we're going to have these guys hostage for a couple of years in a real program to train them to become home inspectors. In that period of time, they should be building their website and SEO. They should be writing about that stuff they're learning in class and starting to come out of the gate ahead of where you and I started. I mean,
right.
When I got into home inspections, after I got out of school, I started going to open houses every Sunday. I did that for a couple of years, trying to meet agents. I wish that I had spent that 2 years just blogging.
Right.
Because but at the end of that 2-year time, I had a few agents that were using me, but guess what? After 3 years, all of them were out of business and not doing it anymore. So, you spend all that time cultivating relationships with agents, because the ones that do it at open houses are the ones that don't have a stable full of inspectors, right? They're starting out themselves. They're trying to learn, I quickly learned that the average agent that was at an inspection had less experience than me.
All right. And for all the listeners go ahead. Sorry. Well, I was going to say, Charles has a really good blog. What, if somebody wanted to read your blog, one of the listeners, where would they,
Just Google my name, Charles Buell Inspections. I'm sure it'll come up.
Are you still on? I haven't been on there in a long time, but Active Rain. I know you were big on that.
Yeah, I was really big, and I'm officially an ambassador, so that's sort of like a level above general membership there. But I don't play there very much. I should. I don't need to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an important thing. I would still strongly recommend that if you're going to pay anybody for SEO, you can't beat what $35, $45 a month that you spend at Active Rain in terms of how that plays with the SEO of your own website.
Yeah, there's agents here that know of you
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you're on there.
Sure, I hear from there's agents all over the country that I hear from every once in a while. They say, they found me on Active Rain, see me on Active Rain, and I can't tell you how well the SEO, building the SEO of your own website, and in conjunction with blogging on Active Rain, was huge in terms of me building my own online presence. And it's not as easy as it was. So you have to put in the work. But
Yeah.
you gotta like to write,
Yeah, no, and I've read your stuff. It's very well written. Now, now I know SEO would be a whole nother,
Yeah, right.
but I know I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole because that could be a whole different thing. Do you do like a lot of backlinks and stuff back to your website? I mean, and I know we could go way deep into that, but just.
I never, that's one thing that I never did. I never played any games with my website. I never did any keyword stuffing or any of that. I just, pure information. And that's really all Google has ever really cared about.
Yeah. And if you're tricking it, they'll figure it out eventually. They'll figure it out.
Exactly. So why mess with it? I never have. I have 12,000 hits a month on my website. And I don't do that much with my own website anymore. I used to, but I don't need to create more ways to say no when I get calls. So, and I'm not like trying to feed other inspectors. I'm a one-man show, and I'm happy to be a one-man show. As a builder, I always had employees, and I'm not interested in going there again.
I hear you, brother. Well, don't get me started on that. There's some days I'm like, he said, what? What did he say?
Yeah, I know. And there's all these tangents we could go off on.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me. That's why I had to write the thing. And it's great. I told Charles in the pre-game, so to speak, that I always wanted this to just be like we're having a conversation at a conference or something. Every conference I've ever been to, I've gotten value, but one of the biggest values was just talking to people over dinner and drinks.
That's right. That's a big thing that people miss about continuing ed. You don't do it for the classes. Yeah, you hope the classes are good. It's the face-to-face, the actual war stories at the restaurant or whatever. This is what continuing ed is really about. So you're not, it's so easy to just do online training and end up living under a log.
Right.
You've gotta be part of the industry and part of I don't know how to explain it, but
no, I'm with you. I'm 100%. Well, Charles, speaking of which, it's big in my market. I think it's big in Seattle too. I got to ask you about the tech companies. The OfferPad, the Open Door, the Knock, the Zillow, which I think is out of Seattle, is now doing instant offers.
Well, Porch too, right? Porch.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like I don't know, they're trying to, I guess, Uberize real estate transaction. The real estate agent seems to be the target. But, I guess my worry as a home inspector, are we collateral damage or are we still independent? Well, how do you feel about that?
Well, this gets right at the core of what I'm about in terms of elevating our profession to the point where we aren't collateral damage for something like that. If we're going to stay just somebody that helps facilitate a real estate transaction, we're in big trouble. Honestly, I don't see any way we can survive as a profession and be solely part of the real estate transaction. I mean, we have to do so much more. We can do so much more and be compensated for it. I don't care what anybody else charges for a home inspection, but I charge probably twice what most more than twice for some inspectors in my market. And it doesn't, yeah, there's people that won't pay that much, but I don't have to work for them.
Right, right.
And there's lots of, I think there's lots of different job, what do you want to call it, business models, a lot of business models that we don't all have to do the same business model, but if we do, if we actually, let's take a business model that all we do is strictly standards of practice, nothing beyond, nothing more, right to the letter of the law. That's one business model, but I don't feel it helps people much.
Right.
It might be exactly what facilitates a real estate transaction, but I'm not interested in that. My clients aren't interested in that. And I think that with the right, we expended just a little bit of energy promoting doing more for the client. They pay more. I mean, how much are they willing to throw at a real estate agent for what they do? Or an appraiser for what they do, or the sewer scoper guy. Sewer scoper guys, they make as much as most home inspectors make per inspection. Then they're there an hour and out. Well,
Right.
Why the heck can't we charge 4 to 5 times that for the amount of time we really spend? You know, it's all a myth, the idea that the public isn't or can't be willing to pay more. It's they lack the education to know that we're withholding. We're with every inspection we go on, we withhold information, don't we?
Yeah. No, I say it's. I always tell people it's like the difference between law and religion. You know, law is the minimum standard of behavior. The minimum.
Yeah.
You're just good enough to not get arrested. And then religion, no matter what religion you are, it's usually a higher standard of behavior. You know, it's more of a ethics and morals, doing the right thing, you know. And, you know, if you're just inspecting to the standards of practice only, to me, you're doing just enough to not get put in jail. I mean, it's like the minimum standard of behavior.
That's right. But
let's progress to the higher standard of behavior. You know what I mean?
That's right. Higher standards of care, whatever you want to call it. One that actually touches even 10% of the stuff we have to know to do this job. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I've heard inspectors, you know, I mean, like we have this standard, you know, standards of practice, and it's pretty the same. A lot of, you know, a representative number of outlets. Well, the reason that language is in there is because if there's a china cabinet or something in front of, yeah, obviously, you know, you couldn't get to that. Nobody's going to move the china cabinet. But some inspectors read that as only have to check one in the room, and that's it.
Well, that's right. And you go into a brand new house totally empty and there's still touching a representative number. That's not what it's for.
Yeah, it's just if like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain. I don't think you should, if that one behind the china cabinet was the one that was messed up, I mean, yeah, there was no way you could get to it. It was but it doesn't give you an out to just not do your job. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. So, and that's part of it. And what it gets down to, though, is what is the main reason they're doing that? Is because they've got another inspection or 2 more inspections lined up after that one, that if they have to be truly diligent on any one house, they're going to be late to the next inspection or not, you know. So it becomes a business model thing again.
Right.
That's why I made a decision early on that I was not going to try to do more than one a day. And at this point in my career, I don't want to do more than one every other day. I don't have kids in college. I'm putting through college or all of that. You know.
I'm getting ready to start that next year. Well,
you've got a whole different mindset about it than I had, than I can afford at this point. Whereas
Well, I've got a 10-year. I need to get 10 years is what I need to get my girls through college. I got, one in a senior in high school and one's a freshman in high school. I got to get them married and off the payroll.
Yeah, really, really. I'm at the point where I've got grandkids that age now. So.
Oh, okay. So everybody off the payroll for the most part?
Yeah, totally.
If I can get everybody off the payroll, I don't want anybody, I don't want anybody asking me what to do each day.
Yeah, you want to, do one inspection, 2 inspections a week and paint the rest of the week. Right?
There you go. You know where I am. That's where I would love to be now, but I've got financial obligations. But 10 years from now, that's where I want to be.
Yeah, and I'm fully cognizant of how different people's lifestyles are. I mean, I remember that when I was a builder, I was build 2 houses at the same time. One, I'd go hit the first one at 4 o'clock in the morning and work till 10 in the morning, and then go home and work on my own house until 10 at night. And you just day after day after day all summer long and build a couple of houses at the same time. But in those days, you did everything. There was no, you hired the mason to come in and do his thing. You hired you did it all. But we've lost that kind of builder. You can't be the kind of builder I was anymore. You just can't. You have to know too much. There's too much. I was lucky to to have worked in an area where I could do my own plumbing and own electrical, because it all had to be inspected anyway. So it wasn't like in some states, well, here you can't do electrical. You've got to hire a licensed electrician. And that's the way it is for all the trades now, but not when I was first started out.
Right.
And there's a huge loss in what somebody looking to become a home inspector, there's no way they can possibly have that background anymore. So we have to do it through mentoring, training, whatever, but they should not be just taking an online class or a course, 4-week course, and expect to be ready to do this job. I tell students, look, if you're smart, you will spend $10,000, $15,000 and find 25 houses, and we'll go tear the house apart for 8 hours. It just
it's smart.
Pay me $500 or $600 a day. I'd be happy to do that.
If you don't do that, you're going to wind up missing something that's going to cost you $15,000.
Right. I think it's just silly to think that any home inspector can do a ride along with another inspector and learn a damn thing.
Right.
I mean, you pick up stuff here and there, but nothing like a teaching experience where you're just there to teach this student about the house and write a report, review the report. And you're not really doing the inspection for yourself to make money. You're making money off of him paying you to do it. That to me is the ideal way to train people that are coming into this profession that have no background at all. They have no.
No, that's good. That's good. Well, Charles, I've read some of your stuff. You're a really good writer. What for people who want to become bloggers, writers, do videos, what is it that makes you decide to write about something? I mean, you go out and do an inspection. What is it that's like, hey, that would make a good blog article, or what triggers that?
You want to, at least if you're thinking of building SEO, you want to find blog topics that are going to answer the questions that people are asking already. I have a blog post that it has thousands and thousands and thousands of hits, and it's like, what is a bar drafter? I'm sure you could search right now, and if you Google what's a bar drafter, my post will be right there.
Honestly, I don't know. I should know, but I don't.
Well, it's at the gable end of the outer rafter that forms the gable end of the house.
Okay.
Barge, B-A-R-G-E, or sometimes it's spelled with a V. But that particular post, and people think, well, how does that get you a job? It's not going to. What it's doing is getting the number of hits on your website that builds your authority, so that when somebody searches for a term that is related to home inspection, like you want a home inspector in Seattle that, for me, Seattle's a hard market because it's so big, but because there's 450 inspectors in my market or more. So your Google searches are going to be more like foundation cracks. Well, I've got a blog post about foundation cracks, and this guy's been looking at a house. They were out with, they saw a big foundation crack, and they wanted to find out what was going on with that crack before they even hired a home inspector or put an offer on the house. They find my blog, they find me as a home inspector, and that's the way you come in.
Yeah, no, it's smart.
Attempting to do SEO for winning the term Seattle home inspector, forget it. There's guys that have business names, Seattle home inspector. they could be terrible home inspectors, and yet they're going to rank really high just because they've got the right name in their title. I think Google is sort of starting to figure that out, but it's still a game that it's like in the old days of the yellow pages. What you do? You were AAA rental, right? Yeah. AAA rental. To get yourself first place.
Right.
But it was funny. It was phony. It was fake. So the algorithms at Google now are so advanced, so sophisticated that just don't play the games. Just blog honest content and be consistent about it. And in time, you will build some authority that I have people tell me, how'd you find out about me? Well, I found your website. But I said, well, did you search Seattle Home Inspector? No, but they still found me anyway. And of course, this kind of goes against the guys that you get these calls every week to help you build your SEO, right?
Right.
Your SEO is tanking. It's crappy. And nobody's finding you. And I said, oh, really? That's interesting. People seem to be finding me. I keep saying no. So they must be doing something right. So you got to be careful about the guys that have something to sell.
Well, that's how I knew about you, Charles. I mean, I saw your stuff way back. I mean, because you put out good content. So it must have been getting out there.
Yeah, I'm always, I field lots of calls. I finally put a donation thing on the bottom of my website. And it's amazing how people throw me $25 or $50, $10, $5. But, so you can, that's more a fun thing to do, but you're not going to get rich doing that. But it's nice to see that people find your stuff, you give some information, and they're happy to throw you some money. It's kind of fun.
That's cool. Well, Charles, let's talk a little bit about pre-inspections.
Right.
You knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And I love Charles, and we blocked horns just a little bit on this, but it's all good. I think Charles likes pre-inspections. I know you have it on your website. Maybe not the pre-inspection programs, but I'll just let you start with pre-inspections. Pros, cons, how you feel about it, and I'll let you talk, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, well, I've argued for a long time that the pre-inspections are great for a seller, but you won't find many agents that agree with that, because they would rather have the seller have their head in the sand about it. and risk that, well, maybe that inspector won't find that thing. And I think that's a little bit unrealistic. I think most
Right.
home inspectors are at least that good that they're not
Right.
miss important stuff. But then you've got different market conditions where it doesn't make sense to do it because it's going to get sold as is regardless. What's the point in doing a pre-listing inspection where you know you're going to make 20 grand more than you're asking for it anyway? So there's different factors that affect how well you can sell it. I don't have a lot of luck selling them. Most of the ones that I do are for people that come to me in advance looking for a listing inspection. And I said, well, have you talked to your agent about that? And so I said, no. And the next thing you know, they've talked to their agent and the agent's talked them out of it. So this is, again, part of my coming back to that question I wanted to move to the second spot, is that we have to get to ourselves to a point where agents are coming, where clients are coming to us asking us, hey, do you know a good agent? How often do you get that? I mean, it happens.
I've had a few. Yeah, I've had a few.
Yeah,
It's not the norm. It's definitely the exception. But I've had it. It's happened.
But how about a world where that was the norm? Wouldn't that be cool? I mean, that would be a sign to me that we had arrived as a profession. Until that happens, we are.
We're the subservient or the submissive. I don't know if that's the word.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I think that it's sort of like a barometer for me.
Right.
If we're looking for something that will say, hey, you're a profession, that'll be one of the great ingredients of that.
Well, I'll tell you where I am, Charles. And I've sort of evolved, and I'll be the first one to tell you, I can think differently as I get older than I did, 6 months ago. I mean, the way I think evolves. Initially, I was really worried about some of these tech companies because, or the idea was, like Uber, push a button, buy a house, and my worry is that they come in and they're going to inspect the house themselves or get these estimators. And my worry is that buyers just go by that. But I'm hoping that what you're saying is true, where we become critical enough or trusted enough where it sort of becomes, don't buy, just like a builder. I mean, don't buy, everybody works for that builder. You need somebody who is looking after your best interest. So even if these tech companies or whatnot have inspected it in-house, done the repairs, I mean, their interest and their due diligence is for the person who's paying them. You really need a home inspector, even if that's the way you buy a house on an app, that's fine. But you still need an independent home inspector who's looking after your best interest.
Absolutely. I think the most dangerous thing that we can ever accomplish as a growing profession is to be at the point where the consumer is buying into the idea that some sort of partial inspection is adequate, some sort of like you were saying, you had a word for it before.
Estimator or
an estimator, where it's not really a real inspection. But the problem is, Preston, I think that a real inspection is actually so close to what these guys are doing that the consumer is going to be hard pressed to sort out the difference. And that's why I think that we have to really up our game and provide so much more service and so much better quality service, information-wise, than is currently considered acceptable and standard. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a case of where home inspectors just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
People say, well, I do a grade inspection. Well, what the heck does that mean? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Compared to what? Compared to who? You don't know what Joe's report looks like. I don't know what. Do we know? Do you know what? We don't. So I think that we need to have a perceived, real notion of what better looks like.
Right.
Right now, we all are the best home inspectors since Swiss cheese, right? It's obvious, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem is that can't possibly be true.
Right. No, I'm with you. Well, that's kind of what, drove me to try to do pre-inspections, to try to preempt that or whatever. But I think the ticket is getting really strong with the value that you offer digitally, your blog, your becoming an authority. I mean, it's like Bob Vila. I mean, whether he's great, but he puts so much content out there, and he's so trusted. Now, I know some people say he doesn't know what he's talking, but you have to admit that he's put so much good content out there. So if you can be, the Charles Buell of home inspection, where you put out so much good content that, you make yourself valuable, and, that's the person you want to inspect the house, the biggest investment of your life. I mean, that's.
Yeah. Well, it gets to the point, what percentage of the time where the reaction of your future client is, well, I can't get to you this week. Says, I can wait. I'll figure out a way to make it happen. I mean, we aren't a real profession until that happens. If they're stuck with some real estate agent defined timeline, we have to get out from under that timeline. That timeline is arbitrary and baloney. You don't see it on commercial inspections. You got 30 days. Why not? What's up with that?
I hear you.
That's ridiculous.
I hear you.
So
Charles, we're coming to the end of our hour here. You've been giving us a lot of valuable information that I know all the listeners. Just got one last thing for you, and I know you got a bunch of these because I used to see the pictures. I just haven't been on active frame in a long time myself. But so what is the strangest, coolest, or weirdest, and keep in mind it's a G-rated show. What's the coolest, strangest, or weirdest thing you've ever found on a home inspection? If you have more than one, I know you have a bunch.
One that comes to mind is the 12-foot dead python I found in a crawl space.
Oh my God.
Where
was it?
In a crawl space. I rolled under this beam and came face to face with these beady eyes of this dead snake. I was glad it was dead.
Oh my gosh. It had to be a pet, I guess, right? It got loose somewhere?
Yeah. The guy had, there were a bunch of empty tanks up in the house. And he was.
Oh, wow. I've found a couple of, carcasses of cats and dogs, and a little late after I'd already crawled over. I don't know about that.
The funny thing about that story was that the dad insisted that I put a picture of the snake in the report.
What?
Because he didn't want his daughter buying the house. And I said, well, I can't do that. I'm sorry, she's my client, not you.
Yeah. That might give her nightmares or something.
Well, she knew about the snake. I told her, and I said, but I didn't put it in the report anyway.
Ooh, I found a couple of live ones in the crawl space, but I've never.
I had a live one too, and we don't see a lot of snakes here. I think you've got some serious snakes by you, but we only have harmless ones on this side of the mountains. On the east side, they have rattlesnakes over there, but here we just have garter snakes and stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've run into several, but the one I remember the most, I pulled the insulation back behind the porch, because you want to check, if there's termite damage or moisture damage, always behind that dirt-filled porch. And as soon as I pulled it back, and I think it was a black snake, I don't know, because I just that thing literally just dropped. I mean, it like came down on my arm, and then, man, that whole thing about them being more afraid of you than you are of them, that's a lot. I'm going to tell you right now, that's a lot. I got out of there so fast. I couldn't even drive, Charles. You know how your adrenaline is like.
I don't hate snakes, but I sure feel better when they're not around. Right?
It took me like an hour to get my hand to stop shaking so that I could put the key in the ignition. But
I hear you there. Yeah, I'm just grateful we don't have. One time I crawled in this, like the ductwork in the sidewall of the crawl space was maybe 2 feet wide, and I crawled all the way in. There's no way I was going to be able to turn around, and I knew that. And I crawled all the way in there. In the last 4 feet, I just couldn't get any further. So I just reached my camera in as far as I could and snapped a couple pictures. And there's a snake coming out of a hole out from under the foundation.
Oh my gosh! How did you get back? Did you just kind of shimmy backwards, or?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, but I raccoons are the ones that I don't.
Oh yeah, when you shine and you see some eyes from the other end of the crawl space. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'm not going to find out. I'm not going over there.
I know they can be way more vicious than any snake in my part of the world.
Yeah, no, they can. They can. Well, Charles, thank you for your time. How can what I'd love all the listeners, if they got value, and I know they did, can they go to your Facebook page and give you some likes, or
yeah, sure.
So is it Charles Buell Home Inspections? Is that what it is? What's
my Facebook page is just Charles Buell Inspections. Yeah.
Okay, and the web page the same if they just Google.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, Charles,
are you going to be in San Diego?
Yes, I am. What? And it's January. What's the actual? The actual. I haven't really. I mean, beyond Christmas.
It's on my other. Unfortunately, my email is all under my picture, on the wrong screen. I should have moved it over.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, but, let's grab a beer.
Dates, but I'm presenting again there, so hope to see you.
Well, let's have a beer after your presentation. Not before.
Maybe before would be better.
There you go. I'll be a little more animated.
I might put my tinfoil hat on.